Hello, Founder fans. Jason here. Welcome to Founder of the Day. Quick week in review and then trivia. I hope you're all having a great Thanksgiving. As we get going, I had to update my software, of course, so I'm assuming it'll run smoothly, but we'll see. A few new buttons I have to hit that I'm not necessarily 100% familiar with, but I'm sure we'll get through it. I am going to very quickly update our little script here to say countdown to trivia, which will be, let's say 25 minutes. That'll get us right to 8:30, and we'll be all good to go. So, here we are, doing trivia. Well, doing our countdown. Thank you for coming. Everyone's showing up. Right now, we're going to start off where we usually discuss Cato number 6. I can count Roman numerals. I did write it down after all. Real quick, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're all having a fun time. Sure, some people will be missing out because they'll be with family today, but that's okay. Either way, la-da-da-da-da. Let's talk about Cato number 6 real quick. So Cato number 6 is really fun. It's the second to last Federalist paper. I should also apologize. I scheduled the next Cato for tomorrow instead of today because Thanksgiving threw me off. Let's see. The audio bitrate is low. Okay, well, we'll see. Hopefully the sound sounds good. Let me know. Okay, Cato number 6, the anti-federalist author, really focuses on taxes and representation. Unfortunately, he starts off, time to cram. Yes, Colonel, it's going to be fun. So in Cato number 6, he starts off by discussing the voting. He goes to the 3/5 clause that is famous now in American history for being absolutely awful, for counting black people as less than an entire person. Historically, we know that to be not very terrible. But that's not necessarily Cato's problem with it. And while I like a lot of what Cato has to say, the beginning of this paper is not a good look. Because he actually says, hey, you don't say the word men. And you're saying the word persons. So you are including slaves, but you're also including women and children. And why would women and children be included when we don't include them in the election process? Are you going to let women vote? And that is, he says some, and pardon my language here, but he says some real sexist garbage, unfortunately. Either way, he continues with that very briefly. But I do want to note it because he does say it. He then goes on to the burden that the new Constitution will place on average citizens. So the argument being made by many Federalists is most of the money we will need to raise to run this new government we will do on imposts. Taxes on imported goods. Cato points out, hey, this is going to take... Hi, Walker. Thank you so much for coming. We're just doing our study hall real quick before we get into the trivia itself, so pay attention. Right now we're talking about Cato number 6. Cato number 6, as I was saying, the Federalists were saying, hey, we're just going to import all this, we'll tax the imports and we'll make all this money. And Cato points out, who again was probably governor of New York, George Clinton, it's going to be really expensive to run a national government. And we also have all these debts from the war we have to pay off. You're not going to be able to raise enough money from the imports, so this isn't going to go great for you. We're probably going to have to tax the people. Even if we don't tax the people, he says, the burden will be placed on the people because import taxes will need to be so high to cover this federal expenses that they will be almost impossible for regular people to buy. I actually have a quote here. The price of commodities, quote, the price of commodities, useful as well as luxurious, will be increased. So not just, hey, fancy stuff we're importing from Europe, but things people need, the price will skyrocket. But people won't be able to afford that. And therefore, the merchants who are trying to pay these imposts by raising prices will have to raise prices even more, and then things will become more scarce, and then people literally won't have access to many of the necessities of life, and therefore the true burden will be placed on the people. I also found it extremely interesting that Cato notes he actually says the best thing we should do for taxes are property taxes. We should just tax people who own land. This is at a period of time where, yes, there were lots of small farmers who owned land and they would also be taxed, but he literally talks about putting the onus of taxation on the wealthiest elite, which does include himself, although Clinton was kind of the outcast among the wealthy elite because he came from much less than most of the other elites, which is why he was kind of a man of the people. Not going to get off on that tangent quite yet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And he concludes by talking about treaties. And he says, hey, why is the House of Representatives left out of the treaty-making process? First of all, why is the legislative branch involved with the executive branch at all? And second of all, why is only the Senate involved in making treaties and not the House of Representatives, especially when these treaties could affect individual citizens? And then I have another quote here that's kind of a side note, a little unrelated, but he says, quote, by treaties, engagements may be made to raise an army, and you may be transported to Europe to fight the wars of ambitious princes, which, you know, seemed prophetic when you consider the world wars 100-something years later. Let's bounce over now to Esther Reed. So Esther Reed is someone I wrote about a long time ago, and I was really excited to bring her back up. Esther Reed was born in England to a wealthy merchant. Her father was a wealthy merchant, and she was a little bit more... Their family was a little bit more liberal than many families because she actually worked for her father as his personal secretary. In the 1760s, when the Stamp Act was passed, the colonists were very unhappy about it. But the people most unhappy about it were actually merchants in England who were not making the sales they used to make because the colonists were not buying it. They didn't like the Stamp Act. So the real reason the Stamp Act was rescinded was actually the merchants in London going to their wealthy friends and saying, no, don't do this. Hi, Ashley. It's been a while. Happy Thanksgiving. So her father that she worked for was one of these wealthy merchants. Additionally, she met a young man who was studying law, a man named Joseph Reed. Now, Joseph Reed, and I should say her maiden name was Esther de Burnt. She met Joseph Reed, who was studying law with the whole Stamp Act thing. Joseph Reed had to run back to Philadelphia to help his family fix their finances. They exchanged letters for a while, fall in love essentially via mail, and talk politics via their letters. Reed then goes back to finish his studies in Europe, and they get married. Shortly thereafter, her father passes away, and Joseph and Esther, with Esther's mother, move back to Philadelphia. Now, Joseph Reed ends up being recruited by General George Washington shortly thereafter to join him on the trip to Boston as an aide-de-camp. Esther ends up taking her mother, and then, I shouldn't have said shortly thereafter, a few years later, because they had several children by the time Joseph Reed joins the war. Esther takes her mother and the children, and they go on the run for several years once Philadelphia is occupied. After Philadelphia is occupied, Esther's husband Joseph becomes president of Pennsylvania, as they called it. Additionally, Esther wants to support the war, so she publishes an article under her own name called Sentiments of an American Woman, where she argues that although there are many things, and everyone was even women were like self-sexist at the time, because she says there are many things that men are much better than women at, but if there's one thing that women can equal men at, it is patriotism. And through this, she ends up starting an organization called the Ladies Association. The Ladies Association was meant to raise donations to support the war effort and the Continental Army. They do this for a while. She is appointed, as you see next to me, Treasuress General. Hi, Historical. Thanks for coming. She is appointed Treasuress General, which I think is one of the best titles in the war. Now, it's not an official title. It's a title within the organization she established. And they actually gave out Treasuress General ships to the first ladies of each state. Every woman whose husband was a governor, they would become the Treasuress General, which I believe actually Martha Jefferson becomes one for a bit. She's really the top Treasuress General. She raises all this money. Martha Washington is unavailable at one point, so Esther Reed actually communicates with George Washington, and Washington writes back and says, don't give the men money. They will spend it on liquor and booze. So what they decide to do with the money is sew shirts for the men. Unfortunately, Esther falls ill and passes away shortly thereafter, less than a year after starting the organization. She is replaced by Sarah Franklin Bach, I believe it's pronounced Bach, who was Benjamin Franklin's daughter, takes over as Treasuress General of Pennsylvania. What Sarah Franklin Bach does is what Esther Reed was hoping to do after Washington said no money. They not only sewed shirts for the soldiers, but the women would sew their names into the collar of the shirt, so that when the men received the shirt, they would know they're not just fighting for themselves, they're fighting for their nation, and they're fighting for the women back home. So, brief overview of Esther Reed, 15 minutes, few more people to get through. Let's keep on popping. Now, Mary Emmons, no known image. What you see next to me is a 17th century, 18th century image of southern India. Mary Emmons is one of the few American founders from India. She was born in Calcutta. Thank you, historical. She was born in Calcutta, Indian, we think. She eventually, as a young woman, a teenager, sails over to the Caribbean. We don't know how she afforded to sail to the Caribbean. She was not a slave. She probably sold herself as an indentured servant, but I am not assuming that, but hypothesizing that. We don't have any records. She changes her name once she gets there to Eugenie Beauharnais, which Beauharnais was a popular name in the area at the time. She's there for a few years, then she moves up to New York, and she starts working as a housemaid for a gentleman named Jacques Marcus Provost. Jacques Marcus Provost was a British officer, and he goes off to war, and he dies, sadly. Not from the war, I think he gets sick, I'm not sure, but I do know that his spouse was a woman named Theodosia Provost. Now, Theodosia had already been having an affair, stop me if you heard this one, with a gentleman named Aaron Burr. Mary Emmons goes with Theodosia and starts living in the Burr household once they get married shortly thereafter, and she works as a housemaid to Aaron Burr. She also becomes a mistress to Aaron Burr. This is left out of the play Hamilton. They have an affair. Aaron Burr has 2 children the same year, one with Theodosia, one with Mary Emmons, and Aaron Burr would have a lot of illegitimate children throughout his fairly long life, by the way. He ends up having 2 children with Mary Emmons, and when he goes to Philadelphia, Mary goes with him, because he goes to Philadelphia as a United States senator, and then, later would be vice president. Mary Emmons comes with him, and she has her second child there. I will get to the children in a minute, but now let's go to the children now. So it's really, unfortunately, Aaron Burr never recognized these children as legitimate. Although there were several children, he just never seemed... There were other illegitimate children he did recognize. Now, of these 2 children, their names were Louisa Charlotte Burr and John Pierre Burr. He does give John Pierre a little bit of land when he's a young man, but that is essentially it. Now, what's really fascinating about this is they were from India. They were Indian Americans, and Mary Emmons is really one of the first Indian Americans that I've ever come across studying the American Revolution. I have read about Americans who traveled to India to open up the trade there, as well as, trade to China, which was important at the time, but I've never come across an Indian American. I didn't realize this, and it's fascinating because it's downstairs, but there's a book by Nancy Eisenberg about Aaron Burr called Fallen Founder. It's a really great book, but she doesn't even bring up the Emmonses in it. She might not have even known about them. It's all fairly new, and it's only been verified through DNA testing very recently. But Aaron Burr had Indian children, and they end up living in Philadelphia's free black community, and John Pierre becomes a really notable abolitionist, and he's an important member of the Underground Railroad. So that's Aaron Burr's very secret Indian family. And I, again, just to reiterate, I don't mean Native American. I mean India. So let's go on. Let's get through this before our time runs out. Doing our study hall now. Anyone just popping in? We're doing our study hall, getting ready for trivia. Oakley Dokley, William Short. So William Short gets, forgive the pun, the short end of the stick when it comes to protégés of Thomas Jefferson. William Short was a distant relative of Jefferson. They probably knew each other before they started working together, but Short goes and he studies law at William and Mary. While he's at after he graduates William and Mary, he starts working for Thomas Jefferson about the time Jefferson becomes governor of Virginia. He sticks as personal secretary with Thomas Jefferson through the death of Jefferson's wife and until Thomas Jefferson goes over to Europe. Now, Jefferson goes to Europe for the better part of 5 years as ambassador to France, and William Short is his personal secretary there. When Jefferson returns to become Secretary of State, well, William Short sticks around, and he is chosen by George Washington as the 3rd minister to France, the first of which being Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, William Short. He spends 2 years there. Now, what's interesting about Short, he keeps communicating with Thomas Jefferson, but, when it comes to proteges of Jefferson, we think of names like Madison and Monroe, which are correct, but they were easy to think about because they would both be Secretary of State and then President, just like their mentor. William Short doesn't have a falling out with Jefferson, but he stays as ambassador through more of the French Revolution, and watching the beheadings, he does not have the love for France that many of the Democratic Republicans and the Jeffersonian Democrats would later have. So Short eventually is replaced by Governor Morris by George Washington. Short then goes over to the Netherlands, where he becomes technically the second ambassador to the Netherlands after John Adams. Though John Adams had been away for a while, we had to send someone to the Netherlands to say, yeah, we're going to pay our debts to you. Don't worry, we're definitely going to pay you. He's there about a year, and then he's appointed as the second minister to Spain after John Jay. Again, some time had passed because Spain was notoriously hard to deal with, and Short doesn't get a lot done with Spain because Spain went back to war with France, and America was still technically associated with France, so Spain wasn't cool about it. And it stings for Short because he's there 2 years. As soon as he leaves, one of the Pinckney family, I want to say Charles, or is it Thomas Pinckney? Let me bring it up. Thomas Pinckney. Yes, there's a lot of Pinckneys in Europe at this time, actually. Thomas Pinckney shows up right afterwards, and the war with Napoleon and Spain ends, and therefore Spain makes a treaty real quick. And unfortunately for Short, like I said, he gets the short end of the stick. But he also, again, followed Jefferson as ambassador to France, Adams as ambassador to the Netherlands, and John Jay as ambassador to Spain, which should indicate the weight of his importance and the trust that George Washington and later John Adams would put in him, especially as the parties are forming, and he is clearly associated with the Democratic Republicans. Unfortunately, the Democratic Republicans don't all love him because he has a little bit of a quarrel with James Madison, of all people. Madison supports France as Thomas Jefferson did and doesn't like Short writing back. It seems there's a little bit of jealousy from Madison because Short was there first. He was Jefferson's first disciple, and not a lot of great things happening there. Now, eventually Short does come back to the United States, doesn't get a job in the Jefferson administration, seemingly because of James Madison. At the last few months of Jefferson's term as president, after 8 years, Short is then chosen to go back. And I want a side note here. Short had been making very good investments in his whole life, so he lived a life of luxury at that point. But Jefferson appoints him as the first minister to Russia. And he sails to Europe, all the way to Russia. And then James Madison becomes president and basically says, no thanks, I'm going to appoint John Quincy Adams. Now, John Quincy Adams, as an ambassador, is a really interesting other story we're not going to get into today. But let's just say William Short arriving in Russia to be told by James Madison, oh, sorry, we don't need you. It didn't go over well. And William Short, well, he leaves Russia not happy. He comes back to the United States, again, had made a lot of money, and he becomes a really important early abolitionist. He writes a whole bunch of papers. He's speaking out publicly about the need to get rid of it. He ends up becoming rid of slavery. He ends up becoming president of the American Colonization Society for a while, which we've discussed kind of a lot recently. And historically, we look back and we're like, well, that was a terrible idea. But, that was really inhumane. But that's not... They were trying to be humane about it. They were trying to find a helpful way to resolve the issue of slavery. Unfortunately, of course, they didn't, as much as William Short may have tried. That being said, he passes away in 1849 at the age of 90 years old. So to put some context into this, he was about 16 years old when the Declaration of Independence was signed. He dies 73 years after the Declaration of Independence, and just 11 years before the outbreak of the Civil War. So that's William Short. We're running down. Now that I put this timer up, it really makes me sweat because I got 6 minutes to talk about George Taylor and the evacuation of New York. George Taylor was from Ireland. He immigrated to the United States as an indentured servant. He spent several years paying off his trip across the Atlantic, working in Samuel Slater's ironworks. Slater later dies. Taylor marries his widow. They end up running the business for a few years until Taylor's son is old enough to inherit it. He then goes and leases, first he leases an ironworks from William Allen, who built what became Independence Hall, though he becomes a loyalist. And then he rents from Joseph Galloway, who goes to the First Continental Congress and issues the Galloway Plan before becoming a loyalist. Unfortunately, Galloway, once the war breaks out, leaves. He goes to London. He flees his home of Philadelphia, and the Continental Congress starts collecting loyalist properties. They go to the ironworks that Taylor's running, and they say, we need to collect this. And Taylor says, but I'm making some cannonballs for you. And they say, you stay here, you do what you're doing. And Taylor does. And he ends up, my understanding is he's the first one to actually deliver arms and ammunition, specifically ammunition, to the Continental Army. About 260 cannonballs between, I think it was 8 and 12 pounds. So he does that. Before the war even started, he had already been elected several times to the colonial legislature, because even though he was just an artisan, he was really making a name for himself in his community. He ends up going to, after independence is declared in early July of 1776, it's still a month before they sign the Declaration, because most of the states had to clear out all the people who were not pro-independence, and Pennsylvania was among these states. They clear out the people, and George Taylor is one of the men elected to the Continental Congress to replace these not loyalists, but not ardent independence fans. They leave. Taylor comes in, literally starts August 2nd, and the first thing he does is sign the Declaration of Independence. He is the only indentured servant to rise in society to the point where he signed the Declaration of Independence. Unfortunately, he's only there about 6 months. They replace him with a better politician, to be honest, but he ends up serving on Pennsylvania's Executive Council, which Pennsylvania's first constitution was very strange. It didn't have a governor or a president, really. It had a council, and he served on it. Fortunately, he falls ill and then he passes away in 1781, just a few months before Yorktown, so he doesn't get to see independence achieved. That being said, we have less than 4 minutes to get through the most fun story of the week, the evacuation of New York City. NYC, bye-bye Britain. So, Britain invades New York City after they evacuate Boston in 1776. They end up going in the late summer, early fall of 1776. They take New York City. 7 years later, they are still there. Now, this is 1783. So 2 years after the victory of Yorktown, the British are still in New York. Now, Governor Guy Carleton is the person in charge of the evacuation. And while the Treaty of Paris is yet to be officially signed, everyone knows the war's over, Carleton starts leaving. It takes him a few months to get everyone out because all these loyalist refugees are fleeing from all over North America to New York City. Please, Governor Carleton, liberate us. And he does. He evacuates everyone. This, interestingly, includes about 3,000 black loyalists, men who had fought for who had fled the safety, who have fled the plantations and the enslavement they had always known to fight for the British, a losing effort. But although the Treaty of Paris instructed that all property, including slaves, should be returned to the rightful owner, Governor Guy Carleton says, forget that, and he evacuates these slaves. To be fair, also, he wasn't really breaking the treaty because it hadn't been ratified by the Americans yet, so there's a little bit of a loophole there for him to do the right thing. Let's be honest about it. Now, once the British leave the island on November 25th, which is Thanksgiving this year, often years Thanksgiving, once the British leave the island, Governor Guy Carleton bounces, and the Americans are allowed to retake the city finally ending the war. That being said, they had to take down all those British flags. So who comes in? Henry Knox leads a small contingent of men into the island to make sure there's no British or loyalists hanging around causing any trouble, and to remove all the British flags and hang up American flags. It becomes very difficult for one particular flagpole that was extra tall, where the flag had been nailed to the pole, and the pole had been greased. And it was very difficult. Fortunately, after a bit of an arduous task there, a gentleman named John Van Arsdale is able to use a ladder and some cleats and make his way to the top, tear down the British flag, hang the American colors, and George Washington leads the Continental Army back into Manhattan. Now, it's not him, it's him and George Clinton, governor of New York, the entire war, and for several years afterwards, Governor George Clinton, who had been governing in absentia this whole time. They co-lead the procession of the Continental Army down Broadway into Manhattan, taking the island back finally ending the war. George himself hangs around for about 8 days after this, leaving on December 4th. He has a very public dinner with Hercules Mulligan, who everyone thought was a British guy, but no, he had been a spy this whole time, and that's why this public dinner happened. On December 4th, Washington says goodbye to his leading generals. At Fraunces Tavern, he shakes their hands one at a time, gives them a good old thank you. It takes him about 2.5 weeks to get to Annapolis, where the Continental Army was meeting, to say, hey, we did it, won the war. He resigns his commission, gives them his commission and his sword. And 2 days later, he is home in time. Actually, the next day, December 24th, he arrives home at Mount Vernon just in time to have his first Christmas at home in 8.5 years. Nailed it. Made it just in time. What do you think about that? Okay, I didn't get all teary-eyed either, which I usually do with that story when Georgie makes it home for Christmas because, think about what you were doing 8.5 years ago. That's how long George was at the war. I'm going to drink some water. We're going to play some trivia. How does that sound? Don't look at that. Okay. Whoopsie daisy there. Now, as you can see, I haven't quite finished all the nitty gritty on this whole setup because up in the corner there, I am eventually going to have some kind of hey, look at this up in the corner. Till then, let's do that trivia. I will also say, I don't have the thing on the bottom yet, but if you type ! Continentals, all lowercase, it'll tell you how many of my little Continental dollars you've earned just from watching so far. And at one point, we might just play a game with it. We'll see if it works. We will see if it works. It should work. It looks like it's all set up to work. So, who's here? Let's do that trivia. Okay. Back to Cato number 5. The first thing we talked about. Cato number 6. I can't read Roman numerals today. In Cato 6, the author argues that the best kind of tax is which of the following? Income tax, property tax, or sales tax? Which of these, did Cato believe should be the should-beest? While we do that, I almost forgot. We got to put down our timer. It's a great song. You're welcome. Where's the timer? There it is. Okay, at a minute. I'm going to cut this one at 30 seconds because I already did it. Now, I know you guys are watching. I got a bunch of comments here. There's a bunch of you here. We had a lot of fun, learned about a lot of things. I know this is a difficult question. We are starting with a fairly difficult question, and I am being patient. While I will remind you that this is the particular Cato paper where he starts out complaining about the voting rights and how... Okay, Jesse White, thank you for coming. Got a shot in the dark. Yeah, I mean, there's 3 choices there. I am going to call it right here. Like I said, I put up the timer a little bit late, so we will call that timer here. And yeah, property taxes. He thought we should just tax the wealthy who own all the property. Why not? It's easy that way. All right, question number the second. What organization was Esther Reed the founder of, and what was the title of her office? Let's get that timer going. Here we go. I'm getting good at these timers. I'm figuring it out. Figured it out. Ashley, sales tax. So technically an import tax is not a sales tax, but that's kind of what they were going for with the imposts in the Federalist argument. But no, for sales tax in particular, there weren't a ton. So Esther Reed, wife of President of Pennsylvania, Joseph Reed, founded an organization. I actually made a t-shirt about her. I put out a t-shirt about her this week because I love her stories so much. Check it out in the description below. There's I'm not going to say what it says because that would be giving away the answer to this. But it is a really important organization led by the women who were trying to solicit donations for the Continental Army. And she has the most badass title of the entire Revolutionary War. Forgive my language. It is the most badass title in the Revolutionary War. All right, Ashley coming through with an answer. That is correct. The organization she founded was called the Ladies Association, and she was the Treasuress General. You are correct, Ashley. Treasuress General of the American Revolution. Love it. I love that title. Next query. Another Esther Reed question. Who took over as Treasuress General when Esther Reed passed away? Like we said earlier, Esther Reed passed away kind of suddenly, not long after founding the organization. She needed someone had to step up, and we are specifically talking about Pennsylvania. As I mentioned, several people were named treasuress general throughout the colonies. Essentially, the first lady of each state would get the title, but when she passed away, it was taken over. I'll give you a hint. It is the daughter of a very famous American founder. I actually come through with another answer. I don't know if you guys see me wince, got a little bit of toothache when I drink some water. Okay, counting down. We got some seconds left. Given time for time to be given for everyone to get their opportunity to let me know. And it's... Okay, I'm not going to wait. Yes, it is Sarah Franklin Bach. Well done, Ashley. 2 in a row. Okie do. So, we're going to go up here with another one. Who was Aaron Burr's mistress, and what city was she probably born in? Again, totally left out of the play Hamilton, which you would have thought when they were talking about the, what's her name? Not Sally Hemings, not Hutchinson. What's your name? It starts with an H, right? Reynolds. No, it doesn't. Is it Sally? It's not Sally Reynolds. Mrs. Reynolds, the Reynolds affair, as they talk about in the Broadway play. You would have thought that they would have pointed a little finger at Aaron Burr and been like, hey, he's doing the same thing over here. They didn't. It's fine. Cut for time. They did other things. Wow, Ash. Oh, well, I forgot to put up I forgot to put the timer down. Ashley coming through. Welcome back, Ashley. It's been a few weeks since you've been here. And yes, Mary Emmons, probably born in Calcutta, an Indian American. All right, pop up here for question number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Name 3 nations that Jefferson's protege, William Short, was named to as minister. Now, I just realized I used the word name twice in that question. I don't usually like when I use the same word twice, so I am a little embarrassed about that. I like to be more creative to that. Name 3 nations that Jefferson's protege, Jefferson mentored this young man, William Short. Name 3 of the 4 nations he was appointed to as a U.S. minister. Again, forgetting the timer. I gotta let it go each time. We'll get the hang of it. I'm sure somewhere in there's a way for me to make it automatic, but I'm still figuring this all out. And doing research for individual papers and et al. Oops. Oh, I didn't mean to press that. Bring that up. I wanted to look at what was said. Ashley coming through with some answers. Anyone else got answers? I know there's more people here hanging out. I know you're here. Give us some answers. Let us know. 30 seconds. Don't get an answer by 15. I'm going to stop stalling and let you know whether or not Ashley's right. The suspense is horrifying. I know. It's tough. It was a happy holiday, and here we are, being suspenseful. And yes, Ashley, France, Netherlands, Spain, and Russia. Spain was the last one, but well done. Well done. Now, I am going to side note here. We've added some things since you've been gone, Ashley. If you type in continent, if you can type right, Continentals, then it will tell you how many Continentals you've earned from watching. I've earned a ton because I have to do things off screen. But when you use that, there are some games we can play. Now, I forgot to put up the game information here, of course, because I'm a dummy. But there are a few games. So you are collecting Continentals as we go. This week, I don't know if we're going to play one. We might, if it's just you, Ashley. It might not work. If someone else wants to pop in and play one of the chat games, as they're called. Where's it? Over there, other side. Let me know. But what's happening now, for those of you who have missed out, is for every 5 minutes you watch, you get 5 Continentals, and then we can use the Continentals to do a whole bunch of stuff. There you are, Ashley. See? You already got 20 Continentals. So, what we can do, if we take this time out, I am going to put exclamation point heist. I think that is it. I think it's lowercase, and I spelled it right. Oh, nope. Heist 10. I am going to wager 10 Continentals that we can take Yorktown. No, wait. Lexington and Concord. Okay, so check it out. Founder of the day. Oh, is it doing both of them? Let's see. What is it saying? Is it popping up here? I think it will. Founder of the British are coming. Captain Founder of the Day is calling the militia. So if you do what I did and type exclamation point heist space 10, then you can wager 10 and join me in my attempt to call together the militia and save Lexington and Concord. Go ahead and give it a shot. It's fun. We're having fun here. This is technically a game you guys can play whenever you want while I'm talking, although there is like a 5-minute cooldown period, so you can't just do it constantly. But there it is, Ashley coming through, joining the heist. Matt! Hey, Matt! Welcome back! Ashley and Matt are back, everyone! What do you know? What a happy Thanksgiving it is. You guys have been gone for a few weeks, and it's very nice to have you here. Again, it's supposed to bring you in. It has trouble, because it's kind of a weird system that I'm trying to involve in the system I'm already using. But we'll see. The Minutemen have rallied and are on their way to Lexington. Gage wins. I did not save America. And for whatever reason, it didn't bring you guys in. I'm trying to figure it out. I apologize, guys. See, it looks like it's a really fun thing to do. It just doesn't want to work. Well, my face is red, but I am glad you guys trying. There is going to be a lot more stuff we'll be able to do in the future with these types of games with the Continentals. You are earning. You can boo me, Matt. I understand. So let's continue with the actual trivia. Question number the 6th. Not American Revolution trivia. I forgot. I did some like holiday trivia for the real quick. Which of these Christmas songs was originally written for Thanksgiving? So you often hear the complaint, there are all these Christmas songs. There are no Thanksgiving songs. Why are there no Thanksgiving songs? Well, there is one that is a Thanksgiving song. It is here in front of you. It's one of these 3. You go ahead and let me know which one you think. Again, I know Matt and Ashley, you come back and immediately I leave the American Revolution. We'll be going back to the American Revolution. Don't you fret. Let's see. Ashley coming through, Little Drummer Boy. Interesting. Matt, anyone else hanging out? Got any guesses? Anybody got a guess? Let's see. I'm going to take a sip of water right now because I am thirsty. It's hot up here. It's really hot in the winter because the wood stove comes over here. Beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Interesting. So, we got a few seconds left. I'm waiting, see if anyone else is going to pop in. If not, then we are going to end that timer. And I'm going to let you know it is Jingle Bells. Jingle Bells was actually written as a Thanksgiving song, and Christmas stole it. Just like as soon as Halloween ends, you get Christmas gifts everywhere. Christmas steals everything from Thanksgiving. Sorry, Thanksgiving. One of my preferred holidays. Not that Christmas is whatever, but one more not American Revolution question, then we'll get back to it. Is Hanukkah a biblical story in the Hebrew religion? Now, don't ask me how I found myself reading up on this. Sometimes I go into weird holes of historical relevance. I do like to learn about more than the American Revolution. It may surprise you to find out. And I'm going to give you a few more seconds here. Unfortunately, the timer, I can't do less than a minute, or else I would probably just do 30 seconds. But no one's answering. It's a little bit tricky. Matt coming through with yes. Okay, we'll see. See if anyone else gets it. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to call the timer now. And the answer is no, not for Jewish people. And not for Protestant denominations, but for Catholics. It actually is part of the Bible. Real quick, about 350 BC, Alexander the Great conquered the known world. And then he died, and 3 of his generals separated his territory. One of which was the Seleucid Empire, I think it's pronounced, in mostly the Middle East and northern India. And they repressed the Jewish people. And those Jews ran for the hills. Eventually, they take advantage of a weakness in the economy, and they come down and they attack. The Maccabee family is usually called, but they're like a tribe. There's a lot of families. They come down, they throw off the oppressors who were occupying Jerusalem, and The Hanukkah celebration is the Festival of Lights. It's they had enough oil for one day because when they chased out the other army, they took all the supplies. But the oil lasted 8 days. The candle burned for 8 days until they came back with more oil for the fire. That's essentially the story of Hanukkah. But it happened. We have records of it. You know, most biblical stories are taken on faith, but no, the holidays, the taking of the Temple of Jerusalem in Hanukkah is historical fact. Unless you're a Catholic, then it is also biblical somehow, because again, you know, Jesus had born the year 0 or died at 32. I know AD is usually is 0, but he was probably born about then. I don't know. I'm not going to get too much into that. But this had really just happened like a few hundred years beforehand, so it was fairly fresh on people's mind. Like, we are to the American founders what Jesus was to the Maccabees, basically. So I thought that was fun. I stumbled onto it. I had to bring it out today. Back to the American Revolution. Who was the only indentured servant to sign the Declaration of Independence? You guys leave for a little while, and then I come out with totally irrelevant stuff. I did do last week. On Saturday. I did a live review of the first presidential election. Tomorrow, I'm going to do another video, a live video on the second and third presidential elections. George Washington's second time, and John Adams. I'm not going to get quite into Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. I guess I could. Maybe I will. Who knows? We're going to talk about more presidential elections tomorrow. Maybe I will go through there because it gets really fascinating after that first election. Especially it's because they start narrowing down and less candidates are there. And I'm going to talk a lot about the rise in political popularity of Aaron Burr, which I've learned a ton about in the last few weeks. Time is up. George Taylor from Ireland traded hard labor for a trip across the ocean and made his way up in the economy, in the community, till he signed the Declaration of Independence. Back to the evacuation of New York City. When the British evacuated New York City, who was sent in to remove the British flags? Before George E. Washalot could make his way into on the Isle of Manhattan, they had to go in and not only remove the British flags, but also make sure there weren't any loyalist surprises waiting there for him. And one very popular founder was sent in to clear house, essentially. As I mentioned earlier, there was a little bit of trouble with the taking down one of the flags. They had nailed it to the pole and greased the pole, which is objectively hilarious and a lot of fun. And they went in to resolve that issue. Ashley and Matt, seems like you're the only ones playing today, which is fairly strange. You come back and everyone else leaves. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. It is Henry Knox. Henry Knox went in to clear out everything, make sure it was A-okay for Mr. President, future President, Commander-in-Chief, George Washington. Last question of the day. Who joined Washington at the head of the Continental Army when the Patriots rode back into New York City? Who joined Washington at the head of the Continental Army? Excuse me. Forgot to put up my thing. I don't want to give too many hints. We have kind of already asked a question about this person today. Matt coming in with Clinton. One of the Clintons. Who knows? Who knows which one? I know which one. I know which one you're referencing. James Clinton just doesn't get the attention he deserves. He did such good work in the Sullivan Clinton campaign. Hillary. Yes. Hillary Clinton. Now, someone needs to make a meme of that and paste Hillary Clinton on the image. Hillary Clinton bravely riding into New York City at the head of the Continental Army. I thought about making a meme account where I talked about like a Twitter account or something doing like fake history facts, and that would have been perfect. Or with the first time the man landed on the moon in the 1980s under the Star Wars program. George Clinton, you got it. Governor of New York, George Clinton, who we will be discussing tomorrow when we talk about the second election, because he was really interesting part of Aaron Burr's meteoric rise to the top of the anti-administration party, what it was called, what it would later, between anti-federalist and Democratic Republican, it was the anti-administration party. And George Clinton is a gigantic part of that. So I'm going to pop back up here. Here, this image next to me, that's the one we'll put Hillary Clinton's face on. Thank you guys for coming. I hope you had a happy holiday. Matt and Ashley, I'm really glad to see you guys back. Hopefully, your schedule changes are they are what they are. Like I said, I did start trying to do some things on Saturday evenings. I can't do it every Saturday. Every Friday and Saturday is impossible, but a few Saturdays a month I'm going to add stuff, because hopefully you guys can, we'll have more opportunity on that day of the week to come hang out. This week was very light on content. I will be honest, I've been putting out my Founders of the Day, but the live content, unfortunately, has been light because of the holiday. This holiday season will be tough, although I am in talks with several people to start doing more interviews, which I'm going to do in kind of seasons, once a week. Season 2 on the way. Hopefully be back more as the... how can I not read this whole thing? As the semester comes to an end. Yeah, well, your studies come first, Ashley, so there's that. Don't worry about it too much. It's a lot of fun. We're here to have a good time. I'm having a good time, and I really appreciate you guys coming. I do, like I said, hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Hope you're getting ready for the future holidays arriving in the next 5 weeks. Is that it? Is that it? People get angry at me when I count New Year's as one of the holidays, I've found. Anyway, not gonna talk about it. You guys have any other questions or anything else to discuss? I'm always available on all the social medias. Email me, whatever you like. Leave a comment below. I am here for it. This pretty much wraps up trivia. There, of course, as always, like 5 people popping in right now. Sorry, guys. It was fun, and you unfortunately missed a substantial portion of it. We will be back next week, as we are every Friday, to do that trivia. And as I said, if you're new here, subscribe, put out videos about the American Revolution 7 days a week. Tomorrow, going live, talking about the second and third, maybe fourth presidential elections, but focusing on the rise of Aaron Burr as a political heavyweight during the George Washington administration. Thanks, you guys. I don't know what sign off to use because I've combined trivia and the weekend review. So, Peacefield, round bottom.